we're back, and I just have a few slides here to introduce you to 360 degrees. Let's go through what we're going to talk about. All right, there we go. Okay, let me look at my chat quick here just to make sure everything's working. Kill the music. Is the music still on? Doesn't look like it. I think we killed it, right? Okay, good audio. All right, we will continue. Alrighty, so let's get into what we're going to talk about. So I want to go through a very brief history of 360-degree imaging. And I'm not going to go into any major depth. There's plenty of research you can do on your own as well, but I just wanted to show you where this idea really came from. Then we'll go into just an introduction of roughly how it works and how you capture that image. We'll talk about the present day of 360 degrees. So again, we're looking at the past, the present, and we'll do a bit of the future as well. And as we talk about present and future, we'll include a brief discussion about virtual reality. That's one of the best ways to view this type of video. So we'll talk about some ways you can do that, and maybe mention the camp that's coming up, the VR summer camp this year. Then I'll give you some helpful tips for viewing this spherical content. And when I say spherical, that's another term for 360, and we'll touch on that. And lastly is the premiere of our 360-degree Observatory Tour. And we'll kind of all watch that sort of together. That'll release shortly after the presentation. Okay, so touching on the history of 360, we have two panoramas here. Can you tell which one is a painting and which one is a picture, a photograph? Maybe. So it's the top one, actually, that's the painting, and that was a painting by Robert Barker from 1787. He was a panoramic painter, the first of his kind, really, and he actually coined the term panorama. So he derived that from two Greek words, pan, which means all, and arama, which means view. So altogether, it's all view, so you can see everything around you. So it was a really unique way, a really unique take on pictures, on paintings in this case, and he developed really neat buildings. They were cylindrical buildings that you could enter and walk around this continuous painting. Really a brilliant guy. Way ahead of his time. But as soon as photography developed, it didn't take long for photographers to want to image everything around them. And that's where panoramic photographs came from. And as soon as panoramic photos came around, the clarity was just so much better than a painting that usually that's what people went looking for. So in 1843, the first panoramic photo in camera came from Joseph Puchberger, I think his name is pronounced. So that's where you get photography, and of course it only built up from there. You could develop new cameras like what's called the Circuit from 1904, and this was the most popular pano cam, and I can show you a little clip of that camera. Let's go over to the web browser quick so we can see how that works. There we go, we'll fit that to our screen here. There you go. So here is the cricut, or circuit rather. You crank it up. Getting it ready to rotate, there it goes. And it was able to take a series of images which you could later stitch together In some cases, you even had a long reel of film that could potentially do the stitching for you. So that's how these early 360 cameras work, these panoramic cameras. You get the idea there. Let's switch back over to our presentation. So that's the early days of panoramic photos. There wasn't really any sort of panoramic video at the time, just because that becomes more complicated, and you really needed the digital age to make that work. So let's move on here to an introduction about 360. So here's for those who remember trigonometry, and those maybe who haven't taken a trig yet, you will become very familiar with this. This is called the unit circle. It's showing that you can break up a circle into 360 degrees, right? So this is getting you to the idea of how these cameras work. But 360 degrees is more of a two-dimensional concept. It's not really digging into a 3D space. And that's really what you need. If you're trying to produce an image that's all-encompassing surrounding your field of view, you need a 3D view, a 3D shape. And since we're going off 360, why not just use the 3D version of a circle in a sphere? So 360 footage is in fact spherical. It's not just around you this way, it's both azimuth, which is what we call this rotation here in 360. It's also altitude in 360. So you get a full view of your surrounding area. We can talk about this in another way too, but I'm going to explain it first in footage we are familiar with, in photograph formats we're familiar with. So let's say we have a scene here, and it's a very interesting scene, right? Just a blank void of white. So that's our scene though, that box. We have a camera. This is just a regular old camera. You could think of your smartphone or anything else. And you're going to take in light from your scene, your particular chosen view, your field of view. And this, coming from the vertical, is called the vertical field of view. If you want to build together an area, though, you need more than just a vertical measurement. You also need a horizontal view. So there's your horizontal field of view. And that puts together that image area that you record or you take a photo of. So that's your scene. That's what we're used to. Just sort of a 2D view of the world, and it's just in one particular spot. And just to show you an example, here's a picture of Kopernik in that same type of format, right? We can't look around in this image. We don't know what's off to the right or left. Maybe there's some deer around and we don't even know they're there. We can't look behind us. It's only this one image. This is what we have to look at. Now let's talk 360. Because this is really all dependent on the type of lens that you have. So if you have a regular lens like on your smartphone, you're only going to have a certain set field of view. The same is the case for 360 cameras. In a lot of cases with consumer 360 cameras, you have two 180-degree lenses opposite each other and facing out to the world to record that footage. So this is what you get. If you take the raw data, the raw image information from a 360 camera with two of those 180 lenses, that's what you get. You get two sort of hemispherical images. This is, of course, a picture of Kopernik once again. And you can see at the edges of this circle, of this hemisphere, of each hemisphere, it's a bit warped. And that's where computers come in. Because if you're going to put these two images together to make a full, all-encompassing 360 view, you need to stitch those two images and put them together. And you can do that through programming. Now, we're thankful enough that 360 cameras have come a long enough way that you don't need to do much in terms of stitching yourself. It all happens fairly autonomously depending on what type of program you're using to do that work. In fact, sometimes a lot of modern cameras just do that stitching right on board the camera itself. So it's getting more convenient to build content like this. Incidentally, this is also a little bit of a teaser as to the type of content we have coming. You can see some stars in that image. Perhaps you saw our 360 Facebook photo of the night sky. We're going to build upon that. I'm hoping Monday we'll have something to share with you on YouTube. So you'll see maybe a night sky time lapse. Be on the lookout for that. Okay, so that's the idea. You have those two different views and you stitch them together. All right, going into a little bit more present day, talking about the cameras. And I will mention we're not sponsored by anyone tonight. So I'm going to show you the camera I used, but there's a lot of great cameras out there, consumer grade, that are awesome to use, and they work on similar principles. So the top three cameras here, they all have two lenses, two 180-degree lenses, each opposite each other. So you're kind of seeing one is hidden, but I can show you the camera I used at Kopernik. It's actually that first one. I'll show you up close here. You can see there's one lens on this side and one lens on that side. And again, each of those records a 180-degree field of view. And together you can stitch them together to show 360. So that's one example of more of a consumer camera. The bottom example is if you have around $5,000 to spare, and you want to build some really professional 360 content. You can see that camera down there is showing you all the different sides. It has, I believe, six lenses on it, and those are all capturing 180-degree information. But with those 6 cameras, you have enough and because they're also spaced out, you have enough information to develop 3D content. So not only is it 360, it's also 3D. And to jump ahead a little bit, that's really useful for virtual reality and getting really immersed in the content you're watching, because you get depth perception. That's how we experience the world. But that's jumping a bit ahead. One other thing I'll mention about these cameras and this technology right now, it's only 3 degrees of freedom. So when I say degrees of freedom, it's a limit to the ways in which you can move. So for instance, I'm sitting here in place, and I can rotate my head left, right. I can go up, down, and I can sort of tilt it back and forth, right? So those are my 3 degrees of freedom when I'm when I'm in a seated position. I'm not moving about the room. We also call those pitch, roll, and yaw. So that's how we view this type of 360 content. Any movement that happens in a 360 video is dependent on the original filmographer. So in my tour videos, I actually made it so we don't move around, but if I was, you wouldn't be controlling that motion. And that's a key distinction because once you get into 6 degrees of freedom, then you actually can move around a scene. And that's where we get into the future of 360 video. So before I do that, I don't think I saw any questions. I'm just going to pause here and see if there are any questions so far. Okay. All right, I think we're good to go. So we'll keep going, but I will mention, I don't know if I actually mentioned so far, that you are welcome to ask questions during this presentation if you have any curiosities about the cameras and how we developed our videos. So let's go ahead and move on to the future of 360. Okay, so here's a jumble of words that really represents where we're headed in this technology. So volumetric video. That's not a term you hear too often because it's in the very early stages of research. So volumetric video is an example of a video that you can move through, not just in 3 degrees of freedom, but in 6 degrees of freedom. So when we add another 3, we have 6 DOF, as it's called in shorthand. That is when you can move about the room. You can move forward and backward, right? I can move off to the left here, left, right, and I can move up and down as well. So that altogether allows you to, and there's a 3 degrees of freedom on top of that, so you can also do all those rotations I talked about too. That is where immersion really comes in, and let's see. Here we go. So if you can imagine that you could transport yourself, you can transfer yourself anywhere on Earth, or possibly someday even to Mars or something, and move around in a completely new environment while staying at home, right in the comfort of your home. That's where this is going. That's where this research hopefully will take us, is that if we want to go visit London, you could go there with this type of volumetric video, and you could walk around in a given space. But you also have to think about just how much data is at play here. I believe after my brief research with volumetric footage, they said a frame of what they were working on, I think this was Intel, a frame of what that volumetric footage came in at 3 gigabytes. 3 gigabytes for one single frame of that. That's pretty crazy. So you have to take in a lot of data to make this work. So maybe you could also go on a flight aboard the ISS. And right now we do this through what's called virtualization of a given environment. So this is where VR starts to come in to play. Because VR right now, with the right content, you can move around in a space. So you can have that 6 degrees of freedom to move around the environment. So here's a little video of, this is actually me in VR. I'll play this for you. And there's not much audio to this, but you might hear a few things along the way. So this is a virtualized view of the ISS. And you can see I can actually maneuver around it, pull myself through it. I'm not just seated in a position. I can actually walk, well, you're not walking, right? You're floating around in the ISS. You can see some cargo floating around in there. That's not exactly accurate. They don't want loose stuff flying around on the space station, but you can see, toss it out of the way there. We can skip ahead too. See what else is in here. I think, yeah, we look at some mission patches. They try to be as photoreal as current VR devices can support. But you see it's definitely still a computer-generated view. It's not like you're fully there on the ISS. They have quite a few patches, huh? Okay, there's also, I think, a view of the cupola, which is a great viewing area on the space station. Let's see if there it is. So even this is going to be an example. It's really cool. It's really neat, and there's a lot of detail, especially in this area. And you can peer out the windows. But let's see here. Yeah, so you look down at the Earth, and it's a decent simulation. You have some cloud layers. It's pretty cool. You can see the horizon out there, but you're still missing some photoreal data there. And the future might involve a combination of virtualization and photoreal information. Like you scan the entire environment of the ISS with as much clarity as you can, and then you put it in something like this. And to some degree, that's what they did with this video, but it's limited. Computers right now are limited. but we're hoping in the future maybe you'll just be able to transport yourself right there. Okay, so that's that. And I think that's also a good segue into talking about virtual reality and how it relates to 360 video. So let me pause for a second here because I feel like there's some questions. Let's see. Yeah, so okay, so just to be clear, it's volumetric footage. It's all one word, and I can go back to that slide quick. There it is. Volumetric is the term if you want to look up more information about it. It's really new technology, and it's very data intensive. Okay, so I will say before I get started talking about this, I wanted to mention our virtual reality camp that's coming up. And again, you can look for more information on our website as far as registration and whatnot. But I'll be the lead educator on the Entering a Virtual Universe, and that will be a virtual reality focused camp. You'll be able to receive a VR headset of your own. In fact, I have a picture here, and I also have it with me. So you can see this is Google Cardboard, and every student in the camp will get one of these. And we'll use this to develop virtual reality content, both 360 images as well as a 360 3D world to explore. And it uses a program called CoSpaces. I think it's CoSpaces EDU. If you want to look that up for more information, you'll be able to. In fact, you can even do some programming in there. And I played a really cool Jenga game in virtual reality using this and CoSpaces. So you get to develop, you get to program. And you can even build your own tour either at home or elsewhere. If you want to go explore a park or something, you can take some 360 photos and go about it that way. There's really cool stuff to explore there. This is a camp for grades 6 through 8. But maybe in the future we'll just in general continue with some virtual reality content and have other programs to explore too if you don't fall within that age range. So check out our website for more information on that. I might bring this back in just a second when we talk about tips, but this is included in the camp when you register. We send that out to you. Okay, but you do need a smartphone to make that work. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about VR. The thing with VR is you're able to see that 360 video and control it yourself just by looking around like you normally would. And it goes beyond that too, like the ISS video you saw. There's games, there's experiences. There's lots of neat content that uses the idea of a spherical video, regardless of whether it is a real video taken in the real world or if it's a computer-generated video. It still uses that concept of an all-encompassing view that you can look around in. Okay, so we'll continue to touch base on VR and as we talk about tips. So we're getting close to watching our premiere of the Observatory Tour, and I want to give you the tools necessary to watch that successfully and in the best way possible with what you have at home. So I recommend, as a baseline, use a smartphone for this. With the YouTube app installed, it will not work as a 360 video just by clicking on the link and loading it up in your web browser. You do need the YouTube app to make sure you can watch it in 360. So you can get that from Google Play or the App Store, depending on what type of smartphone you have. So that's smartphone. Now, when you're viewing on your smartphone, I think I have the previous tour loaded up here. You can put it in full screen. One other thing I want to mention, there will be 3 little dots in the upper right-hand corner. and that allows you to control the quality of your video. So you want to boost that as high as it can go. And I think the highest on mobile is 4K or 2160S it's called, but maybe you can guess what the S stands for. It's for spherical. So 2160S is the highest you can go, and that'll give you a really nice crystal clear picture. If it's buffering too much, you can lower it to, I think, what is it? Yeah, 1440S, that would be okay. If you go too low though, it's gonna be way too pixely. So if your internet supports it, crank it as high as it can go. So that's on smartphones. Now we can talk about a virtual reality headset. If you have something like a Google Cardboard at home, you can plug your smartphone into it. I can demonstrate how this is going to work for our camps too. Now, again, in the same YouTube app, in the lower near the media bar where you can control where the video is, there's a little VR headset that you can click on, and I can show you it split the view into two. And we can pop that right into the headset, lock it in place, and I can go ahead and view my tour right in the headset, see it all around. So pretty cool. And it's sort of, now this isn't the 360 camera that I have, it's not a 3D camera, so it's not going to give you a depth perception, but your brain sort of tricks you into it. So you might get a little bit of a 3D view. All right, so that's the VR headset. It becomes even easier if you have a headset, a high-end VR headset, like there's a bunch of them out there, from HTC and Oculus, PlayStation, any of those headsets, Windows as well, mixed reality headsets. You can use those to view in 360, and that's probably the best way to view it because the screens are really high quality in those and designed for VR. But Google Cardboard works just as well. If you have, even I think they make some plastic versions of Google Cardboard too, that would work. Okay, now again, I wanted to mention this already. You bump up the resolution as high as it can go. You might even see 2880S on Android smartphones. I don't think it's supported on iPhone, but Android you might be able to get that high. That's the native resolution of this camera. So if you can get to that point, all the better. Now, the last recommendation I have for you is it's a really incredibly sophisticated tool, and I'm hoping most of you have access to it, and that is what I'm sitting in right now. It's a swivel chair, right? I can spin, and if I use my smartphone here, because your smartphone is using its gyroscope to detect motion and tracks that with the video, so you can always return to a given point as it's represented in the real world. It's sort of like a window into Kopernik, right? As if you're looking into our building. So with the swivel chair though, you can just rotate yourself around and see everything around you without having to spin yourself in place. So the swivel chair is super handy. It also would work with a VR headset as well. That's probably one of the best ways to view it, is to just stay seated in a single position, but use a swivel chair to rotate yourself around so you don't have to do too much adjusting. That works super well. Okay, so with that said, the 360 tour should be live at this point. And I'm going to double check that just to make sure we're good to go and I send you off on your way. Let's make sure we're all uploaded. If I go to my channel, yep, the Observatory Tour is up there now. So you can just go right to your subscriptions and it should show up, and you can watch that to sort of conclude this program. I'll stay on for another couple minutes here if you have any questions, any remaining questions about the camp, the presentation today, If you have any recommendations too of 360 things you'd like to see that maybe we can offer, definitely shout those out too. But otherwise, you can go ahead and continue to the Observatory Tour where we explore the telescopes. I talk a little bit about how we use our scopes, both the portable ones and the domed scopes. But we go through each dome and explore the 6-inch scope, 14, and 20-inch. So you get to sort of see them without having to travel to Kopernik. And again, if you go to our camp, you'll get a VR headset that can view that content and more. We'll have some exclusive content for that camp as well that you'll get to see. Let's see, any other questions here? Let me scroll up a bit because I might have missed some things. Okay. And yes, the Oculus Quest is in a, yep, that would be a good one to view it in if you have access to an Oculus Quest. There's a YouTube app for it that you can load up, and our video should show up right in there, especially if you're just synced to your account and you're already subscribed to us. You can just play that right in the headset and view it in 360. Okay. Any other questions? I don't think so. I'd like to thank you all for joining me tonight. I hope you enjoyed this 360 presentation. Any tutorials for the public? There's a question. We don't have, at least I assume you mean on 360 video. We don't have any tutorials right now on developing that. I can actually, one thing I forgot to show you guys, if you'd like to see, let me exit out of my presentation here, and we will go to this software very quickly. I have the previous tour loaded up on one of the editing tools that I can use for controlling the 360 footage that I get from the camera. And this was the original building tour, the first one. If you haven't seen that, go ahead and check it out, in addition to the observatory. But if we go ahead and play this here, you'll see, maybe I'll skip ahead a bit. You'll see a stretched out view of Kopernik here and me talking. So you can think of this sort of like a world map, right? If you have a globe, and we know we have a spherical planet here, you take that globe and you stretch it out into a 2D plane. And that's what makes up our world maps. So you get a similar projection idea with this view here. So that's just, if you can see everything that the 360 camera recorded all at once and not even split up into those two hemispheres we saw before. Let's see, if I want to go to another view, I can go to default. That zooms me in just a touch, and now I can rotate the video. And this is what you see for the most part in the Kopernik 360 videos. So I can rotate around, I can look up, I can look down. Again, I am stationary. You can actually, little Easter egg, if you didn't notice it before, there's a tripod, and that's what the camera is mounted on. You can see the shadow out here in the sun. You can see that it's a really good tripod, ideal for 360 because it gets it out of the way for the most part. Now we can zoom in a bit here, see the building. There's another really cool view though that I've enjoyed, and you might see us use it in the future at times. And that's called, it's a great name, it's called Tiny Planet. And if we click on Tiny Planet, whoa, you zoom way out as if you're looking down on a tiny planet, a little world. And you can zoom in a bit. You know, you can see these little tiny trees. I'm just hanging off the surface of this tiny little world here. You can see our Kopernik building still. It's a really cool view And you know, I haven't tried doing that inside yet, so we can skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to go back to the default view. Whoa, zooming back in. We'll click ahead here until we get into, maybe we'll go back to the lobby. That sounds a bit more interesting. So again, here is that default view where I can rotate around. If you are on a PC, if you don't want to use your smartphone or you don't have a VR headset, you can still view the 360 video on your computer. And you just pan around just like this, like I'm doing here. And that works well. It works fine. I don't think YouTube supports zooming in, even on PC. You can try it out. I wish it did, but maybe in a future update they'll work on that. I know on mobile, unfortunately, you can't zoom in at all. Let's see what that looks like on Tiny Planet. Tiny Planet. Whoa, yeah, it doesn't really get a planet perspective here. It helps to have a sky outside. This looks almost like a cylindrical tunnel or like a kaleidoscope or something. Whoa, that's pretty cool. So we'll go back to default view. We'll try one more scene. How's that? Yes, I see a comment here from Noah again. It says, it reminds me of Google Street Views. Yes, yeah, exactly. It is a very similar perspective. They do use panoramic images for those street views. So here's physics. We'll go to earth science. Zoom ahead a little bit here. There we go. There's our earth science lab. And we'll go Tiny Planet again. Another kaleidoscope view of Kopernik. Okay. I think that if you want to see crystal ball too, there's crystal ball. You can rotate the field of view there. If you want to get into, I'll just give you a few more tips here because we still have some watching. Let's go to default view again. If you want to get into 360 video, you can honestly start, or at least 360 imaging. You can start with your smartphone because you can actually put together, with the right app, you can put together a panorama, a 360 panorama. I can't remember the name of it now, but if you just do a search on the App Store or Play Store, you can look that up and look for 360 panorama. And it'll just stitch together a multitude of photos and give you a single 360 image to work off of. It won't do video. Is not really a good way to do that because you need multiple cameras to record those instances that are happening around you. If you eventually down the line someday do get a camera, you can edit it usually right on a smartphone depending on what type you get. Very basic editing though, not much more than I showed you. Like you can trim clips. I can trim this one down if I wanted to. And cut parts out, but that's about as far as it goes on a smartphone or on an application like this. If you really want to delve deep into 360 footage, right now at least, you got to get things like Adobe Premiere. I think it's Adobe Premiere Pro, right? You have to get software like that to actually put text into your video because it's not as simple as traditional widescreen video where you're just working with a more flat image. You actually have to curve the text to match the spherical video that you're operating on. So it gets complex, and you are working with very high resolution files too. So it'll take some practice as well, but as time goes on, it'll only become more consumer friendly, and we'll be able to more and more people will be able to use it. I mean, down the line, I think some smartphones already have cool 360 adapters that just pops another lens or two on your camera, and you can record right from your phone. That's already out there, and it's just going to continue to improve, and maybe we'll just have 360 cameras right on us all the time. Lots of cool opportunities there in the future. All right, with that said, which resolutions? Well, it can usually you don't want to go below 4K resolution. If you go too far below 4K, it really isn't much to see. You really need to see the detail around you. You need to bump it up. This camera here records at 5.7K, so really just a touch above 4K resolution. So you get that detail. All right. Okay, so awesome. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video today. Go watch the Observatory Tour. Check that out in 360. You can watch it in pieces. There's timestamps at the bottom of that video. Check out our summer camps. Again, if you enjoyed today's stream, subscribe to us on YouTube, like this video, and if you're in a position to do so, donate to Kopernik through that donation link in the video description. All right, and with that said, thanks.